Hi there, my name is Oliver. Tonight I will be reading The Sleeping Dragon, the first book of the trilogy Guardians of the Flame, The Warriors, written in 1983 by Joel Rosenberg. This series is very special to me. Several years ago, I received for my birthday this trilogy, in one volume, from my aunt. She told me that in the 80s, shortly after it was released, she had read it to my uncle. She credited it as his introduction to the world of Dungeons and Dragons, that inimitable game upon which the book is in part based. Considering that it was my uncle who later introduced me to that same game, I cannot help but feel connected to this series, in a way I can credit to few others. Anyway, let's get into the story. The Sleeping Dragon. The great problems of life are always related to the primordial images of the collective unconscious. The unconscious is not just evil by nature. It is also the source of the highest good. Not only dark, but also light. Not only bestial, semi-human and demonic, but superhuman, spiritual, and, in the classical sense of the word, divine. Carl Gustav Jung. For every human being there is a diversity of existences. The single existence is itself an illusion. Saul Bellow. It seems to me that there might well be the equivalent, with regard to the collective unconscious, of the concept in physics of critical mass. Are we approaching it? Quite possibly. Consider the resurgence of spiritualism in all its guises, and don't neglect the function of the fantasy role-playing games. The characters, the situations, all seem to touch something that is basic and fundamental. But where would the locus of crisis be, and how can it be exploited? The Elder Edda, the Song of the Harper, the Book of the Dead, even the great hymn to the Aten, offer only hints, suggestions, intimations. Perhaps the best approach would be neither induction nor deduction, but rather empirical experimentation. Perhaps. Arthur Simpson Deighton. Part 1. The Student Union. Chapter 1. The Players. Carl Cullinane reached out his fork and speared the last stick of asparagus from the stainless steel serving plate in the middle of the table, not bothering to set the asparagus on his own plate before taking a bite. It was cold and mushy, almost tasteless. He swallowed quickly. Carl, you're a pig. A skinny one, granted, but a pig. Andrea Andropoulos's smile took most of the sting out of her words. Pitched low enough so that nobody else in the crowded cafeteria would have been able to hear her over the clatter of dishes and the chatter of 100 or so students. Carl put it down to a natural gentleness. Hell, she'd been able to make him like it, almost, when she'd turned him down. Usually, the let's be friends routine drove him into a silent, stomach-churning rage. I gotta rush, Andy. There's a game tonight. He took another bite, added a mouthful of lukewarm black coffee, and swallowed quickly. If I'm late, they'll sure as hell start without me. Put Barack out to pasture for the night. You mean they'll put him out to stud? She chuckled, revealing a mouthful of even white teeth. Carl liked her laugh, her smile. He had always thought that the notion of somebody brightening a room with a smile was just a fantasy. Until he met Andy, that is. Not that he had anything against fantasy. Quite the... It's bullshit, Carl, she said, smiling sweetly. Just an absurd male power fantasy. She reached out and stroked his skinny forearm with a long, dark finger. Was it tanned or not? Andy always seemed to find something better to do during afternoon tanning hours than loll in the sun like some well-oiled roasting slug. Probably the olive tone of her skin was a natural coloration. Maybe not. Of course, there was a way to tell. Trouble was, Carl had never had the chance to check her for bikini marks. Damn. No, it's just a game. A way to spend a little time, have a little fun. A little fun? She arched an eyebrow. You call pretending to chop up a pixie, rape a virgin or three, slice an ogre, you call that fun? Quirking a smile, she sat back in her chair, crossing her arms almost defensively over her blue velour pullover, which was amply filled out, but not tight. Carl liked that. Andy was more than a little pretty, but not an exhibitionist. First of all, he tapped his index finger on the table, forcing himself to pay attention to the conversation. You're missing the point. Pretending isn't the same thing as really doing it. I mean, take last week's session, for instance. Barack strangled an elf, chopped a half-orc in two. Hey, now the critter's really two halves of an orc. Or should that be quarter orcies? Never mind. The point is that he took 3 points of damage. 1's a light wound, 2's more serious, going up to 5, which is certainly lethal. 3's the equivalent of getting sliced up pretty bad. He reached for his shirt's top button. Care to check for scars? Some other time. She tossed her head, sending shoulder-length black hair whipping about her face. Maybe. A strand came to rest on her slightly too long, slightly bent nose. She blew it off. Then again, maybe not. Teaser. That's only half the word, Carl. You don't have to use that bullshit with me. In my neighborhood, mother was only half a word. That might sound good, but it wasn't true. Carl was the product of middle-class suburbia. And besides, I was kind of pointedly told to watch my language around women. If you consider having your mouth liberally washed out with lifebuoy to be a pointed telling. Which it was, after a fashion. But to get back to the point, it's all just a fantasy, a game. No harm, no damage. Anyway, Barack isn't that sort of character. He'll violate a law, but he's no rapist. That was true, but omitted a new character Doc Deighton had helped him roll up, one Lucius of Pandathaway. Lucius was not a nice person. Not at all. The trouble with you is that you feel perfectly free to judge something you haven't tried. How many times since the start of the semester have I invited you? 10? 20? She shook her head. I don't have to jump out a window to decide that I'm not going to like it. Irrelevant. If you try role-playing and you don't like it, you quit. Period. No scars. Not even on your psyche. Which is part of the fun. He shrugged. Besides, it's probably beneficial. You get to work out some aggressions without hurting anybody. Not yourself, not anybody else. Stop trying to sound like a psych major. You're supposed to be studying to be an actor these days. I used to be a psych major. And a poli-sci major. Plus American Lit, engineering, philosophy, sociology. Am I missing something? Pre-law, and 2 weeks of pre-med back when I was a freshman. What's your point? You're a dilettante, Carl. This role-playing stuff is just another one of your temporary obsessions. Remember last year when it was bridge? You spent a whole semester nattering about Stamen conventions and South American Texas transfers, whatever the hell they are. South African Texas, not South American. He dipped 2 fingers into his shirt pocket and pulled out a cigarette, then lit it with his shiny new Zippo. Carl let the flame flare for a moment before snapping the cover shut. He figured that he might as well enjoy it while he could. He'd lose it soon. Carl could never seem to keep track of things. The Zippo was the 3rd lighter he'd bought that semester. I still play bridge, he said, exhaling a cloud of smoke. It's just that this is more fun, particularly with this group. Sometimes. He let his voice trail off. Yes? Sometimes, when you get the mechanics of the game out of the way, rolling the dice, keeping track of what you're carrying, it's almost like you're there. He lifted his head and smiled. And that's something. How often do you think I'm going to get the chance to, say, rescue a princess or slay a dragon? He glanced down at his wrist. 6:48. Carl pushed himself to his feet. Well, I've got to run if I'm not going to be late. See you later? Andy's brow furrowed. How late are you going to be? Getting back, I mean. Probably be back before midnight. If you want to meet me in the lounge, I'll help you go over Deerslayer, if that's what you mean. It's a rotten book, though. I've got a Twain piece on it that pretty much... No. She shook her head. I'm caught up with that, but I do have a quiz in astronomy tomorrow. If you're sure we can be back by 12, I'll come along, give it a try, if the invitation's still open. She stood, taking her bulky yellow ski jacket from the back of her chair and slipping it on. You know it is. She sighed. Yes, I do. Andy shook her head slowly. Which is part of the problem. Never mind, let's get going, shall we? James Michael Finnegan was the first player to get to room 109 in the student union. It was partly a matter of habit, but mainly of pride. The others, well, they'd wait for him, sure. Only for him. Damn it. They wouldn't wait for him because he was now the most accomplished player in the group. Davy Davidson had been the best in the group until he dropped out last year. And nobody would wait for Davy and his character, Eric of the Three Bezants, on the not-too-infrequent occasions that he'd arrive late. James Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his hands limp in his lap. No, they wouldn't wait for him because he was a nice person to be around, with a dry sense of humor and an always-friendly smile. That monomaniac flake, Carl Cullinane, cracked better jokes. That hick jock, Walter Slavotsky, always seemed to have a grin pasted on his face, and everybody always liked being around Doria. But if one of them showed up late, it was, well, too bad. It seems your character is down with a cold tonight. Just last week, Doria had fluttered in breathless just 5 minutes after they'd started, and even Ricchetti had ignored her implied promises and threats. Doc Deighton had just turned a very cold eye her way and suggested that lateness was an implicitly hostile act. He spun his chair in a tight circle and swore softly under his breath. It wasn't all that bad, not always. The one time he'd had to wait for the special student services truck, all the way muttering a spell to change the driver into a toad, a particularly small, unusually ugly toad with one eye, and had been wheeled into the elevator late, coming out on the first floor late, his car battery-powered chair zipping down the tiled hall and into room 109 late. Nobody had said anything, except, "Hi, James," and "Nice to see you, James," and "Let's play, James." The tolerance, the implied pity, was bad. Not playing would have been worse. Much worse. All cripples fantasize, you see. They have to, just like normal people, although not always about the things normal people do. And when you've spent your whole life with muscular dystrophy, you're really lucky in a way. There's lots more things to dream about, like being able to punch a computer keyboard at better than a scorching 10 words per minute, like sleeping in a top bunk, like feeding yourself quickly, wolfing down food so you could run off somewhere, like using a goddamn bathroom without having someone else wipe you off. Like not having to be so goddamn cheerful all the time, since because you're a phoebe in a chair, people will let you get away with anything as long as you don't touch them. But the game. Ah, there it was, all at once. "I'll walk across the room, heft my axe, and chop at the ogre," you'd say. And everybody would react to it, just as though you'd really done it. A miracle? Well, not quite. An addiction? Yes. James Michael lifted his right hand to the steering knob and wheeled himself over to the long table in the middle of the bright room, getting himself so close that his chin was directly over the edge of the battered mahogany surface. He reached into the denim bag on his lap, secured there by a long cloth loop around his neck, and pulled out a large plastic bag, bringing it up to the tabletop. And the whole wonder of it depended on this little bag, and the dice inside of it. Standard 6-sided dice for the attack tables. A 20-sided die generating a random number to compare to Ahira's intelligence or endurance or strength. And Ahira was strong, though not terribly wise, perhaps, and certainly not handy with anything except an axe or a hammer. And then there were the pyramidal 4-sided dice, and the 8-sided ones to... But why bother thinking about the mechanics of it? They didn't matter. The rules were soon learned and subsumed, the way a normal person would learn to ride a bicycle by technique and then forget the technique. To ride. James Michael closed his eyes and dreamed of riding a bicycle, seeing the ground slip by smoothly beneath it, sort of like riding in a car, but being there and... "James!" His eyes snapped open like twin shutters. Doria Pearlstein stood over him, concern creasing her too round, too smooth face, her short blonde hair only making her seem chubbier. "James, are you okay?" "I'm fine." He smiled up at her, making a special effort to keep the traitor muscles of the right side of his face under control. Doria tried, that was it. The little dwarf in the chair revolted her and scared her, as though his disability could rub off, but she tried to hide it. He brought his hands down into his lap, out of sight. No shame, just a reflexive kindness, although he really wanted to reach out and shake her. "I'm not contagious." "I'm just fine. It's been a busy week. I guess I was just dozing off." She dropped into a chair, visibly considered the possibility that it would seem to him to be too far away, took a half-second to fight with her own fear of James Michael Finnegan, and compromised by wiggling herself a scant inch closer. "Someday," he thought, "I'm going to tell her that she doesn't have to sit next to me if she's so uptight. Then again, maybe this is better for her than sitting across the table from me. It's natural for her to avoid my eyes this way." She forced a smile, drumming crimson fingernails against the tabletop. "I see I'm early this time." "I'm glad you're here. We ran into a fairly heavy-duty goblin last time. Could have used a cleric." "How bad?" "Both Barak and Ahira took quite a bit of damage. He got 3 points. I got away with just 2. "Wait a minute. Where was Sandy?" "Dropped out. Which leaves you as the only cleric around. The team's top-heavy with warriors." "Ooh." She grimaced. "Sorry I was late last time." She tossed her head, brightening. "But don't worry. Soon as Doc works me back into the campaign, I'll heal both of you up." James Michael smiled. "Make that heal Barak up. Ahira's just fine." She wrinkled her forehead. "How? I know Barak had some healing draughts in his bag, but Ahira..." "Persuaded him to fork them over." She toyed with the ruffles of her blouse. "What did you offer him?" "As though I didn't know." She raised a finger in mock accusation. "Not bashing him with my axe." "Sounds fair." She reached up and scratched the tip of her stubby nose. Slovatsky claimed it was artificial. James Michael had a standing bet that it was natural. Unfortunately, there was no way to find out. Doria ignored all questions on the subject. "But one of these days he's not going to stand for it if you keep it up, bully. He might—" She caught herself. "Never mind." James Michael sighed. It was obvious why Cullinane didn't want to fight him, despite the way he'd been provoking the confrontation. If Ahira killed Barak, Cullinane would lose, and if Barak managed to win, James Michael would be, at least temporarily, out of the game. Cullinane wouldn't want to kick a cripple out of the game, would he? I guess he recognized that it was more useful to the whole team to have Ahira up and healthy, what with us being underground and all. A dwarf's natural habitat was in underground warrens, where his ability to see in the infrared gave him a clear advantage. "That sounds like a bit too sound reasoning for Barak. His IQ's not that high, is it?" "Wisdom, Daria, wisdom. Barak is the wisest fighter around, not a berserker like Ahira." He formed his hands into clumsy fists and pounded himself lightly on the chest. "Arg." A new voice bellowed from the doorway. "You going berserk again?" Walter Slovatsky swaggered into the room, smelling vaguely of ivory, his hair damp. "Doria? James?" He nodded, dropped his books to the floor, kicked his shoes off and in the general direction of a far corner, and perched himself tailor fashion on the table. "How goes it?" Of all the people on campus that he knew, hell, of all the people he knew, specifically including his parents, James Michael was most comfortable around Walter Slovatsky. Jealous, sure, but not unusually so. James didn't particularly want to be a football hero. The thing was that the big man was so sure of himself, without being offensive about it. Whether he was stomping quarterbacks out on the field or spending extra time in the ag library cramming for a final in meat science, a course that Slovatsky couldn't mention without chuckling, Slovatsky seemed certain that the universe centered on him and that all was well with the universe. A massive hand reached out and chucked Doria under the chin. "And where the hell were you last Friday, my love?" "Thursday." She shoved the hand away. "And you know damn well where I wasn't." "You were the one yelling, 'Come on time if you want to play,' weren't you?" "No, I meant Friday. I thought you were going to come over, spend the night." "Shh." She started to jerk a thumb towards James Michael, stopped herself. "I don't think—" "Precisely. You don't think." He turned to James, running blunt fingers through his damp black hair. "Jimmy, me boy, would it be any surprise to you to learn that Doria and I sleep together every now and then?" "Walter!" "No, not really," James Michael said. Doria's pale skin went from light pink through various shades of red before settling on a nice hot crimson. He looked her in the eye, suppressing an urge to reach out and pat her arm. "Not that he ever said anything about it. I'm pretty good at reading people for a—" An impish impulse made him pause. "Computer sciences major." Walter's broad face went somber. "Exactly. Beautiful, I don't tell on ladies. Wouldn't mention it in front of Cullinane, say. He's an explosion looking for a place to happen. Trouble with you Jewish girls is that your desire to do it is in inverse proportion to your willingness to talk about it." Doria's skin had gone back to its normal shade, which made her glare at Slovatsky a trifle less comical. "Another one of Slovatsky's laws?" "Actually," he cocked his head to one side, "I think that I got that from one of my many roommates. Bernstein the rabbi, I think." Many roommates was a fair statement of fact, James Michael thought. Not a whole lot of people liked spending their nights mainly on the couch in the lounge. Slovatsky brightened. "But I don't mind stealing it. Make it Slovatsky's Law number 23. Right after never date a woman with a brother named Nunzio." He bounced to his feet. "I'm going for coffee. Either of you need anything from the snack bar?" "Shoes," James Michael supplied. "Sorry, they don't serve 'em there. A burger close enough?" He patted the hip pocket of his jeans. "On me. Had a nice bet we wouldn't beat the spread against Yale." "No, you've got to wear shoes." Slovatsky looked down at his blue sock-clad feet, then blanked his face. "James, when you're 6'1" and a fraction, weighing in at 223, nobody tells you you've got to wear shoes." His eyes glazed over. "Walter not understand. Person half his size telling him he not come in. Walter must have misunderstood." He shrugged a bit sadly. "You wouldn't believe how easy people believe that if you're big, you've got to be dumb and violent. Now, do you want anything?" Doria shrugged.
Coffee sounds fine.
James?
Herb tea. Red zinger if they've got it, with plenty of sugar. He mimicked Slavatsky's big and dumb voice. I hear I need to keep strength up.
That's the ticket.
Walter paused in the doorway.
But if it takes me more than a couple of minutes, don't let them start without me. Assuming that the rest get here on time.
I wouldn't dream of it. Doria's voice held a definite chill.
Hey, Dr. Deighton, wait up. Jason Parker broke into a lope, letting Ricchetti fall behind. The thin, stoop-shouldered man stopped under a streetlight and turned, the harsh green casting his face into shadow. He wore a tan wool suit, amply decorated with burn marks from his ever-present bulldog briar pipe. The suit, like the pipe, the battered briefcase, and the man, had come a long way since new, the wrinkles having developed a life of their own, as though they would be resistant to even the stubbornest, most persistent dry cleaning.
Good evening, Mr. Parker.
The voice was out of place. It was a strong young tenor, the voice of a prepubescent boy, not a 60-ish philosophy professor.
And good evening to you, Mr. Ricchetti,
he added, as Lou Ricchetti panted up to join them under the streetlight.
I trust you're ready for the test tomorrow?
Lou Ricchetti shrugged, his round face covered with a light sheen of sweat. I hope so, Doc. I've got the Apologia practically memorized, and this is my second go-round with the Republic.
Jason chuckled.
It was a good bet that Lou would flunk again. He never seemed to be able to understand anything that didn't have a number attached. Engineering students. Hey, no teaching tonight, Doc. You're game mastering tonight, not using your conclusions to prove your postulates. He took an impatient step toward the student union building. Deighton took a few puffs on his pipe, then followed.
You have that reversed, Mr. Parker.
He blew a smoke ring. It shattered and drifted away into the light, cool breeze.
One uses one's postulates to prove one's conclusions, not the other way around.
Jason shrugged his bony shoulders and tucked his hands into the pockets of his fraying army jacket. That's what you say. Seems to me you philosophers do both. Sort of bootstrap levitation.
A nice phrase, that. Not true, mind you, but a nice phrase.
Deighton sighed deeply.
But your major premise was correct. We are gaming tonight. Mr. Ricchetti, I apologize if I seem to be pressuring you about the test tomorrow.
No problem, Doc. Ricchetti cocked his head to one side. Any clues about what we're going to run into after we get through the treasure room?
Ricky, don't ask.
Jason tried to keep the irritation out of his voice, and failed. Either he won't tell us, in which case you're just wasting your breath, or he will, and that'd ruin the game. Let it flow, don't force it. Okay, I was just asking.
Actually, I can tell you something without spoiling anything.
Deighton smiled crookedly around his pipe stem.
But if you'd prefer to wait...
Go ahead. Jason was curious. Doc never gave anything away, except at the start of a campaign, of course, where the game master would have to set the scene and give out a clue or two.
We are beginning a new campaign tonight, from scratch.
Wait 1 minute.
Ricchetti slapped his book bag. I've spent one hell of a lot of time turning Aristobulus into a K-class wizard. I don't want to have to start again back in A-class with just one spell. Sleep, probably.
At least Ricky was keeping his wits. Of all the spells available to an A-class wizard, the sleep spell, technically Hurstel's spell of induced somnolence, was the most useful. Once you had an enemy sleeping, he, she, it, or they were as good as dead, if you wanted them to be.
That was not what I meant, Mr. Ricchetti. We will be starting a new campaign, yes, but not with A-class characters. They wouldn't be likely to survive. You can run Aristobulus if you like. The balance should be about right that way, as a matter of fact.
Jason ticked players and characters off on his fingers. Let's see. Cullinane and James are going to run their warriors, I'm sure about that. I talked to Carl about it earlier, and James always runs a hero, of course.
Jace, I don't think he always does, didn't he?
Nope. You should pay attention. It was obvious why the poor little guy always wanted to be a warrior. The game was the closest he was ever going to get to being like Slovatsky. It was kind of pitiful, the way James Michael tried to pretend he wasn't jealous of Walter. Or, possibly more accurately, Walter and Doria. Let's see. Doria is the only one who likes being a cleric, God knows why, cleaning up after everyone else's fights. Slovatsky could play either as a wizard or a thief.
Or a monk. I like Master Quan.
Too limited. Depending on the situation, we might need a thief, but a monk is a waste. He can't advance fast enough, can't carry enough, most of the time. Everybody else has to carry him.
Dayton's slate-gray eyes went vague. Actually, I think you might well need a thief. Or two. For this campaign, a balanced team would be best. I think you'll find all of the archetypical situations in this one.
Fine, Jason said. We'll have him run Hakim. That gives us 2 warriors, 1 cleric, 1 wizard. Take a bow, Ricky. Looks like Aristobulus is going to be on his own. And 1 thief.
Plus you, Jace.
Right. Any suggestions, Doc? I really don't care what sort of character I get, so long as I get to do something.
Quite possibly a thief would be best.
Or a thief assassin. I've got Lendwill ready to run.
No, I doubt that you'll need to have anyone poisoned. You might want to choose someone more dexterous than Lendwill. Jace, how about running Einar Lightfingers? You haven't run him for a while.
He is kind of fun.
They walked up the stone steps of the student union, Richetti bustling ahead to hold the door. Give it a try, Jace. Not that I'd turn my back on him, but Lightfingers is awful good at what he does, all things considered.
You first, Doc. Age before beauty. On the other hand, if he hurts his other arm, he'd be pretty much out of the picture. Jason shrugged. But what the hell, I'll run him. As they crossed the yellowed marble floor to the stairwell, Jason stopped. But I don't like just having 1 wizard. What if Ari gets killed?
Deighton shrugged. You could find an R-class cleric and have him resurrected, or conceivably help Doria of the Healing Hand rise to that height. Fat chance. I don't think I've ever run into a cleric past N-class. And what is she now, J?
K, Ricky. As a cleric, she's 1 step farther along than Aristobulus is as a magic usurer.
That's magic user.
Jason returned Richetti's glare. I meant exactly what I said. I didn't like the way you charged everybody 1,000 gold each to charm the eater.
Richetti shrugged. Wizard's gotta make a living just like anybody else. You'd rather I let him eat Doria?
He took the lead in the hall, their footsteps echoing hollowly on the tiles. No, but...
But nothing. Value is relative. First law of economics. At that point, Aristobulus's value was pretty huge. I think you should have been happy to pay. Deighton stroked his chin. I think you are asking a bit too much of Mr. Parker. Perhaps the fee for your services was proper, certainly. Adding gratitude to it does seem excessive. That the game master talking, or you? Just me, just me. And here we are. If you would get the door, please. Richetti swung the door open. Jason ushered him and Deighton in before following.
7:30 on the nose. Nice timing, Doc. Ricky, Jason, Walter Slavatsky said, from his usual spot on the table where he sat like an improbably massive sprite. Hi, Hakim. Jason dropped his jacket in a corner, setting his books on top. He took a moment to check out the other players as he took his own seat across the table from Deighton, next to Doria. As usual, to Doria's left was James Michael, huddling in his wheelchair like a vulture waiting to pounce. Next was Carl Cullinane. Jason shook his head. Carl was still trying to persuade his sparse growth of facial hair to become a beard. Actually, he might have been able to make it if he wouldn't give up and shave after a few weeks. But that was the trouble with Carl. He never followed through with anything. On the other hand, he thought, that might be a bit of a hasty judgment. From the way Carl was perched protectively close to the woman sitting next to him, it seemed that perhaps here was something he'd follow through with. She was a bit too, well, Mediterranean for Jason's taste, but Carl seemed to go for that type. And another mystery solved. Now we know why Carl's been ignoring Doria's come-on. His mind, such as it is elsewhere. Hakim, Slavatsky interrupted his thoughts with a friendly bellow. Something going on that I don't know about? There was just a hint of a threat in the question. Ask Doc. Ricky, toss me a cigarette. Richetti obediently pulled out a box of Marlboros from his faded blue work shirt and rolled one across the table. And a match. Without pausing in his hushed conversation with the woman next to him, Carl Cullinane pulled out a shiny new Zippo and slid it across the table to him. Thanks, Carl. You gonna introduce us all to your friend, or do we have to wait until Doc issues us psi ratings? Cute. Carl's face made the word a lie. Andrea Andropoulos, Jason Parker. Jason nodded. As Andrea smiled in response, he decided to reconsider his original appraisal. Nice. The one with the maps, charts, and calculator, Carl jerked a thumb towards Richetti, is Luigi Rossetti. Lou. Richetti didn't bother to look up. Doesn't matter. Call him Ricky, just like everybody else. You've met the rest, except for Doctor Deighton, and by the process of elimination, she should be able to infer that I'm he, no? Deighton set his briefcase on the table and opened it, careful as always to keep the open back towards the table, the contents hidden from view. And, as everyone is here, shall we begin?
Hold it, Doc, Carl objected. We haven't rolled up a character for Andy yet. Deighton smiled indulgently. That was what I meant by beginning, at least in part. Do you think you can help her with that? Honestly, mind you, while paying attention to my briefing? What briefing? We're still stuck in the treasure room. A whole bunch of dead critters and jewels lying around. Barack cut up pretty bad, and... Actually, I am terminating this campaign. We start a new one tonight, from scratch. Deighton raised a palm. All I ask is that you give it a try. If, say, after half the evening, even just an hour, perhaps, the consensus is that the old one is more entertaining, we will resume where we left off. He tapped his briefcase with a gnarled forefinger. But I've spent quite a bit of time on this new campaign. I am certain that it will appeal to you. Deighton smiled, momentarily appearing much younger than his 60-odd years. Quite certain.
Slovatsky shrugged. Let's give it a try, then. James, that okay with you?
Fine.
The big man gave Jason a meaningful glance. And now I understand what you were up to before. I'm supposed to run a thief this time. Hakim Singh, just as a guess.
It would help balance the team.
Jason puffed on his cigarette. But it's up to you. What do you know that I don't?
Quite a... Gentlemen. Deighton rapped the stem of his pipe on the table. In answer to your question, Mr. Slovatsky, Mr. Parker knows nothing that a few minutes of listening to me won't teach you. He raised a bushy eyebrow. If that's acceptable. Mr. Ricchetti, if you will be kind enough to close the door and spin the dimmer switch down to low, we will begin. Deighton took a deep breath. Now.
Chapter 2. The Game. The chessboard is the world. The pieces are the phenomena of the universe. The rules of the game are what we call the laws of nature. The player on the other side is hidden from us. We know that his play is always fair, just, and patient, but we also know, to our cost, that he never overlooks a mistake or makes the smallest allowance for ignorance. Thomas Henry Huxley. While Deighton began to speak in low, mysterious tones, Carl Cullinane borrowed 5 four-sided dice from James Michael, then slid a well-chewed pencil and a sheet of paper in front of Andy. She picked up one of the dice. Funny-looking little pyramid, but how do you get the numbers to come up on top? You don't. Look at it a bit closer. Instead of being stamped in the center of the faces, the numbers, 0 through 3, were along the edges. When the die was thrown, the player would read the upright number, the one closest to the table. But I want to keep half an ear on what Doc's saying, so we'll make this mechanical. I'll fill you in on the background later, okay? Fine, but bear with me if I'm slow. He couldn't let that pass without turning to look her straight in the eye, letting a tight grin creep across his face. She didn't have the grace to blush. This campaign, Deighton intoned, his face lit demonically by the light of the flashlight in his opened briefcase, is the quest for the gate between worlds. Now write this down on the paper. STSIWMDWPENC. Find yourselves on a hilltop, overlooking a vast walled city, and... Doc? Carl half raised a hand, then brought it down. Yes? Deighton snapped. Sorry for interrupting, but I've got to know. How do you want me to generate her character? And what level? This sounds like a pretty heavy-duty campaign. You're not sending in an A-class character, are you? Good point. Deighton nodded a quick apology. Try 3 rolls for each characteristic, and set Miss Andropoulos up as a C-class whatever. If her intelligence is high enough, try for a wizard. The company is a trifle light in that department. Wait a minute. Ricchetti's head snapped up. Despite the great skills and talents of Aristobulus. Now, if I may proceed. Andy tilted her head close to his. Intelligence. If he's suggesting... No, he was talking about your character's intelligence. But let's roll strength first. He gestured at the 5 dice. Go ahead. Andy shrugged, took the dice, and rolled them gently. 3, 3, 1, and 2 zeros. How's that? Not too good. Strictly average, in fact. The top possible score is 15. Try again. Twice more, in fact. I think we can better a 7. The next roll brought a total of 5, the one after a 9. That's not too bad, but it's not too good. Your character's barely above average strength. Speed next. It's related to strength. We throw out any rolls that aren't within 2 points of your strength score of 9. Her first roll was 5 zeros. Doesn't count, Carl said. 3 more tries. In the 3 tries, she couldn't do better than 8. So you've got average speed. Roll for intelligence now. Her best score out of the 3 rolls was the best score. A full 15, and that's good. Means you can be a wizard, like being a magician, except for real.
Almost.
Right. Deighton droned on.
To the north, you see a great body of water stretching out to the horizon. It could be an inland sea, but the wind blowing across it brings no smell of salt. You suspect that it is a lake. Instead, roll for wisdom. Wisdom? What's the difference between that and intelligence?
Edith Bunker.
What?
She flinched as the others glared as though in chorus.
What?
She whispered. I said Edith Bunker, from All in the Family. Not too bright, but wise as all hell. Or to take a counterexample, Richard Nixon. Get it?
Fine.
3 rolls gave her a 10. That's not too bad, he said. Manual dexterity is next.
As opposed to electric dexterity?
She arched an eyebrow. As opposed to weapon proficiency. Wizards can be dexterous as hell, but not with weapons. It comes with the territory. Roll.
Beside your party is a collection of large wooden boxes. Except for weapons and personal effects, they are the only equipment you have with you.
The best she could do was 5.
Too bad. Guess I'm clumsy, eh?
And cold. He smiled. Now, weapon proficiency. Her first roll was a total of 12, which is a waste of some good numbers, Carl said. The best WP a wizard can have is 5, which is what we'll give you. Now try endurance.
You have no sure recollection of how you got to this hillside, and the only possibility that suggests itself is too incredible to be taken seriously. A 13. She lifted her head, which means I'm hardy as hell, right?
Close. 1 more to go.
What's the C stand for?
Charisma. Roll. Her first roll was a perfect 5 threes. Which figures, he mumbled. Andy just smiled back.
And now, Deighton straightened himself, all that remains is for you to decide who you are and what to do next.
Not quite, Doc. Carl tapped Andy's sheet. Still got to work out her spells, decide on a character.
Quite right. Miss Andropolis, if you'll step over here, you and I can work that out. Mr. Cullinane tends to be a bit too generous with spells, as I recall.
Not fair. James Michael's voice held a decided edge. I was there the time Carl rolled up Martin the Illusionist. Righteous rolls, all of them.
As it may be.
Deighton motioned Andy over to his side of the table. And now, it is time for you to decide on your characters, weapons, and effects. James Michael Finnegan held himself back from the arguments over who was going to do what. There was no question that he was going to be Ahira Bandylegs, a dwarf warrior of great strength and weapon proficiency, average intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, low speed, because of the 3-point penalty for his short dwarf's legs, but with an endurance level that was just this side of magical. That was settled, for certain. On the other hand,
damn it, I don't want to be the cleric this time.
Doria thumped her hand on the table.
Let me run a warrior, a thief, a wizard, and get to do something. One of you be the cleric.
Cullinane shook his head. Who? The only one of us with a reasonably high-level cleric is Walter, and as I recall, his cleric's only about a D class. We'll be better off with Walter as a thief. Cullinane shrugged. It makes sense to do it that way. Slovatsky shifted position uncomfortably. I do have a cleric character. He licked his thumb and riffled through the character sheets in front of him. Jin. But it's Rudolph. The incompetent, Jason Parker finished, his voice taking on a whining tone that made James Michael itch. Forget it. A D-class cleric in a killer campaign? Come on, Dor. Stick with what you're best at. Ricchetti sucked air in through his teeth. Why don't we let her decide for herself? If she's tired of being a cleric, if she wants to do something else, let her.
Thanks, Ricky.
Doria smiled a promise at him. Now that was strange. Ricchetti always followed Parker's lead. But, of course, James Michael nodded. The only character of a higher class than Ricchetti's Aristobulus was Doria's cleric, and Ricchetti wanted to be the most advanced character in the game. Cullinane spun around. You want to be the cleric? Ricchetti sneered. And have our only wizard be a C-class novice? Don't be silly. James Michael sighed. If this haggling went on much longer, it would threaten to cut heavily into playing time, and that would be intolerable. Excuse me. 5 pairs of eyes fastened on him. Ricky, it seems to me that you're being kind of generous. Usually you're the one pushing for a balanced team. At least you were, until Doria went up to K-class.
Yes, but
Ricchetti obviously couldn't think of a but. But nothing. The fact is that Doria of the Healing Hand is K-class. Aristobulus is J-class, one level lower. I'm sure, Ricky, that you'll put aside your jealousy, for the good of the group. He turned to Doria. If you're willing to be the cleric, that is. Suddenly he was ashamed of himself. Not that he'd meant it that way, but Doria was taking it as a request from a cripple, and she wouldn't turn down a little fee, would she? Please, Doria, say no. You wouldn't give in to anyone else on this. Treat me like everyone else for once, please? She nodded. I'll be the cleric, but I want to have a say in your characters. You choose mine, I get to veto yours if I don't like it. Agreed? Agreed, James Michael sighed. Fine, Parker said. Ricky and I were talking to Doc on the way in. He kind of agreed that it would be a good idea for Walter to run Hakim. If that's... Yippee! Walter leered at Doria. This thief's gonna steal your heart, he is. He riffled through his character sheets and selected one. I like that greasy bastard. Please don't veto him, Doria beautiful, please. He clasped his hands below his chin and ducked his head. Okay. Doria turned to Parker. And I suppose you've decided on a character already? Parker shrugged. Einar Lightfingers, I guess. Doc suggested that we might want to have a couple of thieves along, particularly if we're going to have to steal this gate thing. Cullinane's head snapped back from his almost constant staring at the new girl, who was still talking with Doc in the corner of the room. Steal it? Do we know that it's portable? I was helping Andy roll up her character. Must have missed something. No. James Michael made it final. We don't know what it is, where it is, or how it does what it does, although I'm willing to bet I know what it does. Big fat hairy deal. Walter waved it away. Getting to it, and then doing whatever the hell we're supposed to do after we get to it, is the problem. Parker tapped a pencil against the table. But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Doria hasn't okayed me as Lightfingers, James as Ahira, or Ricky as Aristobulus. You want to veto them, Dor? James Michael suppressed a scowl. Cute. By lumping his and Ricchetti's characters in with James Michael's Ahira, Parker was making it more than a little awkward for Doria to exercise a veto. Doria opened her mouth, closed it again. A quick glance at James Michael, then, No veto. Fine. Parker slid a sheet of paper in front of him and picked up his pencil. Now on to weapons. I don't see any problem for Lightfingers. Short sword, dagger, and a few throwing darts should do it. He looked over at Ricchetti. Unless you think I can get away with armor. Add a character. But how about tools? Parker lifted his head. Doc, do thieves' tools come under the heading of personal effects? Don't worry about it. I suspect rather strongly that you'll find all that you need in the wooden boxes next to your party on the hillside. Deighton turned back to Andrea. Fine. Parker glared at his back. Just fine. James Michael tapped Slovatsky's leg. Do you think I could arrange to borrow Hakim's +3 battle axe? Nope. Walter didn't bother to take the sting out of the refusal. Hakim doesn't lend anybody anything. You want to talk buying? With Hakim? What would the price be? 2 or 3 times whatever I could come up with? Doria laughed. He's got you. Probably 4. James, you'd better stick with your usual stuff. The battle axe, crossbow, and... She wrinkled her forehead. Flail. I like to go well armed. Flail, she agreed. If you think you can carry all... Everyone was silent for a moment. Damn it. Why can't you forget about it for one bloody second? Walter raised himself and stretched. Hakim, my friends, will be carrying a scimitar and 2 braces of throwing knives. Be more specific, please. How many knives in a brace? James Michael kept his words as acid as possible, but couldn't help smiling his thanks. 2. Always 2 in a brace. Walter quirked a smile at Carl. And if you're running Barak, I assume he still turns up his nose at anything except his 2-handed broadsword? Yep. Cullinane sat back. Established character trait. Wait a minute. Doria sounded more calculating than peeved. I'm thinking about changing my mind and vetoing Barak. Carl snatched his lighter from the table, stuck a cigarette in his mouth, and lit it. Make up your mind. He snapped the lighter closed. I've been running Barak all semester, but if you've got an objection, let me know. You think I've got another character that'll be better for the team? No, but... Doria's within her rights, Carl, James Michael said. You stupid bastard. You treat her like a piece of furniture, then get offended when she insists on a bit of attention.
Thank you, James. But go ahead, Carl. Run Barack.
She smiled ingratiatingly. James Michael tried to keep his face straight, but brought his hands up to rub at his eyes in case he failed. All the dynamics of a kindergarten. Doria is still chasing after Cullinane. He's hooked on Andrea. Badly, unless I miss my guess. And to make it worse, Parker has been shooting meaningful glances Andrea's way, and Cullinane's looking as though he wishes he had a real sword to run through Parker's guts. So Doria tries a quick, I don't have to let you, but I will, to get some attention, all of which means, Walter Slavatsky leaned over. Looks to be an interesting evening, all things considered. He tapped his temple with a stubby finger that was almost the size of a hot dog. Walter may look dumb, doesn't mean he is.
Just what I was thinking, on both counts. James Michael raised his voice. And since neither Aristobulus nor Doria carry weapons, I think we're all set. Except for picking a team leader, of course.
Parker sat smugly in his chair, which wasn't totally unreasonable. He'd been doing an adequate job as team leader in the Draw Dungeon campaign, the adventure that Deighton had just terminated. But that was as a warrior, not a thief. Walter reached out and laid a massive hand on James Michael's shoulder. You think you're up to it, Jimmy, my boy?
What?
Parker was stunned. Cullinane, Doria, and Ricchetti smiled their approval in unison, as though they had rehearsed it. Even Ricchetti? Hell, Ricky followed Parker around like an obedient spaniel. Makes sense, Ricchetti said, drumming his impatience on the table with nail-bitten fingers. Can't have a thief as team leader. Nobody'll trust him farther than I could throw Walter. For Ricky, the game came first. Yes, but nothing, Jace. Cullinane was enjoying this, perhaps a little too much. James has been gaming longest here. He hasn't been team leader in quite a while. Give him a chance. His glance over towards Andrea took most of the pleasure out of hearing that. James Michael wished there hadn't been superfluous reasons. Doria, beautiful, speak up. Walter slipped down from the table, stretching broadly. If you're in agreement, then let's have Doc finish getting Andrea's character ready and play. He rubbed his hands together in mock impatience.
It's okay with me. Besides, there'll be plenty of time to argue and fight once we start playing.
She turned to James Michael and actually smiled as if she meant it.
You're on, Ahira.
Fine. James Michael folded his hands in his lap. Okay, everybody. Character sheets to Doc. Start an encumbrance list.
With what?
Parker was still chafing. With just your weapons and armor so far. Once we open the boxes, you'll add to that. Doria of the Healing Hand?
Yes, Ahira?
I'll need to know your spells. That goes for you too, Aristobulus. Ricchetti? No, Aristobulus. Get into the spirit of it. Nodded. You want me to write them down for you? Hera doesn't carry sheets of paper. Orally, of course. You first. Okay. Ricchetti closed his eyes. If James Michael could remember his spells, so could he. Good. I'm carrying Hurstel's spell of just the short names. Make that sleep, lightning, fire, glow temporarily, the two-way version of charm, injure, preserve, shatter metal, and dispel magic. That's 9, isn't it? Yes, and that's fine. Don't waste them now. One of the rules of the game was that a wizard's spells were immediately forgotten when used. It was sort of like firing a gun. The gun could be reloaded, but a spent cartridge was gone, and it would take valuable time out of a campaign for a wizard to relearn his spells from his spellbooks. Often that time couldn't be spared. Doria? She had to consult her notes.
I'll memorize them, Ahira. Here they are. Heal minor wounds. I've got that one 3 times. Make edible.
Handy. Good choice. Situations could come up where there wouldn't be food at hand, but with that spell, the company could survive for a long time on anything. She could even make cafeteria food edible.
Thanks, Ahira. And warm, glow, heal disease, the gift of tongues, heal serious wounds, and ta-da, locate. That last could be handy, no?
Very, but be careful. You'll have to know what the gate is, roughly where it is, and will have to be reasonably close before you use it. He turned to Cullinane, smiling. I know what your special skills are. Cullinane cracked a smile and stroked at the stubble that he'd no doubt thought of as a beard. Arg. Arg indeed. Hakim? Walter Slavatsky bounced to attention and bowed from the waist. clasping his hands in front of him. "Thy servant, O Short Sahib." "Don't waste the oil on me. You might need it later. We're going to need a thief on this quest, probably." "Yes, O source of all wisdom. But what is thy point?" His look of total innocence was perhaps a bit overdone. "It would be a shame to have to execute you for stealing from members of the party." James Michael mimed hefting an axe. "A great loss." "As it would be to thy servant." Walter felt at his neck. "So this unworthy one shall keep thy counsels in mind." "See that you do." This was getting better all the time. "And light fingers?" Visibly, Parker considered giving him a hard time, not playing along. James Michael was counting on Parker's basic desire to play to overcome his irritation at not getting to be team leader for once. For a moment, opposed desires balanced. Finally, Parker shrugged and answered in a harsh whisper. "And what do you want?" "Good. I want you to listen very closely to me, thief." "I always listen closely. To humans, at least. Not to a filthy little dwarf." "Barak, do you think I should have to take this?" "No. You want me to persuade him, Ahira?" James Michael glanced over at Deighton, who was again standing in front of his open briefcase, his hands hidden inside. One of the things James Michael liked a lot about Doc Deighton's game mastering was that Doc almost always chose to do the dice rolling himself, freeing the players from as much of the mechanics of the game as was possible. It helped to maintain the illusion, the atmosphere. "Will that be necessary, Einar Lightfingers? Barak would lop off your remaining hand if I asked him to." And Carl Cullinane would probably enjoy kicking Jason Parker out of the game by killing off Parker's character. Lightfingers/Parker sighed. "What do you want me to do?" "Good. And it's not what I want you to do. It's what I want you not to do. Understood?" He rapped on the table. "I know your habits. We won't have any of that nonsense in this company." A pause. "Understood." And we're off. He gave a slight nod at Deighton. "You have just awoken on a hillside," Deighton intoned. "A company of 6 adventurers, seeking treasure and fame." "Wait a minute," Aristobulus grated. "How did we get here? And I thought that there was—" "Patience, please. Last night you all slept in an inn, which was located in a village just south of the great walled city, Detareth. You don't know how you got here." He stopped. Doria picked up the hint. "Where the hell are we?" "Yeah. What are we doing on this hilltop?" "Last thing I knew, I was kicking the serving girl out of bed so I could get some sleep." That was from Slavatsky/Hakim. Ahira leaned back, closed his eyes, and smiled. "From the top of this hill, you can see the dawn sun, rising over another walled city. It is not Detareth. The walls of this city are some wet-looking gray stone." "Forget the distance. What's close up?" Ahira understood Parker's impatience, but wished that he'd contain himself. They would learn soon enough. "Beside you on the hillside are half a dozen large wooden boxes. They are plain, almost cubical, each side roughly the height of a dwarf." Eyes still closed, Ahira spoke up. "Nobody touch the boxes. We don't know what's in them." "I'll dispel any spells." "You're not thinking, Aristobulus," Ahira shot back. "First, if it's harmless, you're wasting a spell. Second, there could be, say, a magic carpet inside. You want to turn it into a throw rug?" "But what can we do?"
"Hakim." He voiced it as a command.
"Here, Sahib." "You want to give the boxes a try? Careful now."
A deep chuckle.
"So, you want me to be the sacrificial meat? Very well. I walk over to the nearest of the boxes and run my fingertips lightly over its surface."
Deighton. "You feel nothing unusual, although your—" As he paused, dice clattered. "Your suspicion is that there is a hidden catch."
"For some reason or other, I suspect there is a hidden catch, Ahira. You want me to find it?"
Deighton. From behind you, you hear a voice.
"Quick," Ahira said. "Everybody turn around. Barak, loose your sword, but don't draw it. Aristobulus, get ready to throw a spell. If anything funny happens, throw it."
"Which one?"
"Lightning." James Michael knew that the new voice would be Andrea's character joining the group. But Ahira was a suspicious sort who wouldn't know that anyway. Best to be prepared. As you turn around, you see a young human woman,
dressed in the gray robes of a user of magics. Go ahead.
I'm supposed to say...
Andrea was uncomfortable. James Michael resigned himself to having a hard time getting her into the spirit of things. Hakim/Slavatsky's basso boomed, "Speak for yourself. Are you possessed by a demon, wench?"
Wench? Oh, no, I'm not possessed by a demon. I'm a... Lotana,
she said, the accent firmly on the second syllable.
And, she added in a low monotone, I'm going to get even with you for this, Karl Cullinane.
Never mind, James thought. Get back into it.
Greetings, little girl. Would you like a piece of candy?
Barak, Ahira snapped out. If Einar Lightfingers opens his mouth again, stick a sword through his lips. Delighted. Bringing a new player, a new person, into the company was always a touchy situation. Ahira didn't need Lightfingers complicating matters, not with a not terribly experienced magic user.
Lotana, we are a band of adventurers seeking something, although we don't know quite what yet.
Deighton. You have a vague, unexplainable feeling that what you are looking for is something called the Gate Between Worlds.
Although we all share a vague suspicion that we're looking for the Gate Between Worlds, whatever that is. Would you like to join us?
Sure. What were you going to do about those boxes on the hillside?
Doria's voice was almost a whine.
Open them, silly. Okay, fine, I'll open them.
No, don't.
As the first box was opened, you were overwhelmed by a rush of...
James Michael couldn't hear the rest. A rush of sound like the roar of an impossibly loud, impossibly near jet buffeted his ears, acrid smoke invading his nostrils, until he found himself on his knees in a coughing spasm, his tearing eyes jammed shut. He bounced to his feet on the damp grass, reflexively reaching for the axe strapped to his chest, loosening the straps with 2 quick jerks, and taking the axe in his gnarled, well-muscled hands. Well-muscled hands. He opened his eyes. He was standing on the side of a grassy hill, a dwarf with an axe in his hands.
Oh my God.
And with that, we come to the end of Chapter 2. What started as a simple game has, impossibly, become something much more. How did this happen? What will they do next? We will have to find out in the next installment. Thank you so much for listening. I greatly appreciate it. I am excited to start this new set of recordings, and I hope you will continue to follow along as we make our way through The Sleeping Dragon and its sequels. Have a good night.